Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today I wanted to do something a little bit different. There will be no guitar playing in this video. I just really wanted to make a video on my list of top 5 all-time live albums. Now obviously making a video like this, it's a little tough because obviously everything is subjective. What I like, you might not like, and vice versa. But these albums for me either had a really big influence on me as a guitar player when I was a kid, or I just really love the sound of them. When I was very young, I wasn't really a big fan of live albums. I really liked the regular album versions. Now, apologies in advance if you hear the fan. Normally I have that turned off when I'm making these videos, but it is currently 103 degrees in this garage. As I mentioned before, I live in the Southwest, so I'm hoping that since I'm not recording any guitar, I should be able to get away with it. I don't have the fan blowing directly on the mic, so we should be good there. These are in order, so we're going to start here. These are in order from, I'm going from basically from 5 to 1, and stick around at the end. I do have an honorable mention for the 5th spot. So coming in at number 5 for me is going to be this album right here, Scorpions Worldwide Live. I love the Scorpions, always have, ever since I think the very first song I ever heard from them was Rock You Like a Hurricane, which I'm sure many of us, if you're of a certain age, if you're older than me, you heard a lot of other albums first, or songs first, but for me, I really love this album. I mean, it's got, it's a double album. It's got all the classics on here: Blackout, Loving You Sunday Morning, Big City Nights, Still Loving You, Rock You Like a Hurricane, Can't Live Without You, The Zoo, No One Like You. It's just, I love this album. I really like this album a lot. I have it on CD, I have it on vinyl. I don't think I still have it on cassette. I do still have all my cassettes. One of these days I will bust those out. I have probably about 350 cassettes. I never throw anything away, so which is why I still have cassettes. But this is definitely coming in at number 5 for me. If you've never heard this album, if you've never listened to it, highly suggest listening to it. It's a great live album. Coming in at number 4 for me is probably not a huge surprise, Kiss Alive 2. Now, I love Kiss. If you're a fan of my channel, I love Kiss. I have Kiss stuff, all over the place. There's a ton more Kiss stuff that you can't see all up here. The toys, the dolls, posters, video, just 8-tracks. I have Kiss everything. So this is definitely a huge album for me. I love this album a lot. It's got most of my favorite songs on here. My 2 favorite songs of all time are Love Gun and I Stole Your Love. And I know Kiss used to open up with I Stole Your Love. I got to see them a couple of times, but when I saw them, they weren't opening up with that. So, this is just such a great album. This one has the inserts and things in it, some of the stuff from back in the day. Always loved, when they gave you kind of cool concert footage. I really connected with this album when I was a teenager. And Ace Frehley, is my, he's on the wall back here. He's one of my guitar heroes. Hearing his solos and things just really inspired me to play guitar when I was a kid. And just, the songs are so classic on this album. They've stood the test of time. This came out in, what year did this come out? 70, where is it? 70 something. Surprising. Let's look at the album here. 77. So this came out in 77. It really has stood the test of time. I'm sure most of you have heard this. I know they had Kiss Alive 2, and then in the 90s, I believe they had Kiss Alive 3, which is also really good. It's not in my top 5, but it's definitely in, top 20. So that is my number 4. Moving right along here, this one might be a surprise to some, but for me, There's no question. UFO, Strangers in the Night. This album is phenomenal. It is a phenomenal live album. Michael Schenker, I hate using the term underrated. I really do. But I just feel like not enough gets talked about Michael Schenker for what he did and inspired guitar players, in the 80s. A lot of people say if he hadn't left UFO, they would have been maybe like the Metallica of the 80s, where, in the 90s, Metallica was like the biggest heavy metal band. A lot of people say UFO would have been that had Schenker not left UFO. Now, he was a kid, right? Obviously, who knows? But this album, when I first heard this album, I think I was probably a late teen when I first heard this album, and I was just blown away by the guitar playing of Michael Schenker. I mean, the solo in Rock Bottom, that long solo, the Lights Out, Rock Bottom. I mean, I could just sit and listen to that for hours. Just pick it up, put it back. Just pick it up, put it back. I love this album. And again, another album that inspired me to want to learn how to play guitar. So if you've never heard this, which again, if you're watching my channel, I'm sure you have, but if you haven't, I highly suggest checking this album out. This album came out in 1979. Now, a buddy of mine says that there's like some pictures in here or something, I can't remember. A guy I know that owns a record store says that he was at this show, which is definitely possible. He is about 10 years older than me, 15 years older than me, so I think he would have been a teenager at that time, so it's definitely possible. I'd really love to interview that guy one time. He's an ex-roadie. He's got so many pictures and stories, and he owns a record store here. I'd really love to interview him. I've asked him before he should start a channel, but anyway. So again, here's my number. This is number 3 for me. If you haven't seen this album, again, definitely recommend checking it out. That brings me to my number 2 pick here, which again is going with this, Iron Maiden's Live After Death. This album is actually what made me start listening to live albums. I believe when I heard this album, and my brother, this was recorded in Long Beach, California, I believe in like 1985, and this was recorded, my brother lived, my half-brother, he lived in Long Beach, and I believe he was at this show. I'll have to ask him again. Either he was there or he was around it when it was being recorded or something like that. But when I first heard this album, the very first time I heard it was on cassette, which I still have. But when I heard this, Churchill's speech, and it just comes in aces high, then right after that, 2 Minutes to Midnight, it's just non-stop heavy metal. I loved this album. After I listened to this whole album, like I said before, I wasn't a huge fan of live albums, but I believe, if I remember correctly, after hearing this album, I decided to give live albums another chance and go deeper down the rabbit hole and see what I could find. And it's basically because of this album. This would have been my number 1 album because it had such a huge impact on me musically, that it should be number 1. But when I show you what the number 1 album for me is, again, this is all subjective, you'll probably understand why when I explain it. But another double album, very just a kick-ass album from side 1 all the way to side 4. Every song on here is great. One of my personal favorites, love Power Slave, but one of my personal favorites is where is it? The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. The live version on here is just amazing. It's pretty long, but it's just cool. The sound effects they use, I can only imagine. And that was really one of the reasons that this album stood out to me so much, is because, the crowd interaction when the Rime of the Ancient Mariner's playing, right? And you can hear the audience cheering, and you can hear the the theatrics going on in the background of the show. I just was like trying to envision being there, and this album conveys a live experience, in my opinion, extremely well. It really made me feel like I was there. And I always love the album cover too. I love that. One of my favorite, this is probably my favorite Iron Maiden album cover that they've ever done since the very first album, all the way up through the 90s and today. I love this album. I have this t-shirt. I love this album. So again, if you've never heard this album and you're a metal fan, I'm begging you to check this album out. Begging you. So that's my number 2. Before I show you my number 1 album, I'm definitely curious your thoughts on my list here, and if there's other ones that I should check out, please leave them in the comments. Let me know your top 5 favorite live albums of all time. I'm always looking for new music, and I will be happy to check it out and let you know what I think. So if you made it this far, I really do appreciate it. Take a second to subscribe if you like what I'm doing here. Guitar lessons, like I said, album reviews, gear reviews, and things like that. So now it's time for my number 1 album. So this album that I'm about to show you is probably the number 1 reason that I play guitar. After hearing this album, I just was in awe. I could not believe what I had just heard. The very first time I heard it was on cassette. Funny story, a friend of my dad's, when I was a teenager, when I was like 13, he was about 25, 26. So he was a teenager in the early 80s. Well, he saw that I had long hair, and that I had like rock posters in my room. So one Saturday he came over to hang out with my dad, and he brought me a box of just stuff, like 80s stuff. Cassettes, records, t-shirts, pins, just everything that basically he had. A lot of the stuff, I'm sure it wasn't everything, but a lot of the stuff he had from when he was a kid. And in that box was this cassette. And this album changed my life probably from the first time I heard it, and I still listen to it all the time. And it's this. The Ozzy Osbourne, Randy Rhoads tribute. I love this album. Again, obviously it's number 1 in my list. And the song that really just blew my doors off and made me want to pick up a guitar, more so than Van Halen Eruption. I know everybody talks about Van Halen Eruption, and I love Eddie Van Halen. I have a guitar of his. I mean, guy was a genius. I loved Eddie Van Halen. I loved his tone. But I heard this before I heard Eruption. The solo in Suicide Solution is what did it for me. Just listening to that, I believe it's the last song. I actually have the cassette. It's actually sitting right over here. I think the same one that the guy gave me. I still have it. It's in my cassette player because I was listening to it not too long ago. But the end, that guitar solo in Suicide Solution just blew my friggin' doors off. I could not believe what I had just heard, and right then I said, wow, I want to learn how to do that. I want to learn how to make that sound. So for me, there was no question that this was my number 1 album, because not only is it a kick-ass album, but it has a personal influence on me, because after I heard this album, like, I became obsessed with guitar, and that's how I stumbled across Eddie Van Halen's Eruption. Was digging around, reading magazines, looking for like guitar solo stuff, asking people, hey, I just heard this really cool thing, Suicide Solution. Is there any other guitar that sounds like that? And a friend of mine was like, oh yeah, check out Eruption by Van Halen. Got that cassette, and yeah, again, same thing. But I heard this first, and to this day, I still can't play it. I still can't play this guitar solo from this because it's Randy Rhoads. I mean, come on. I know there are people that can, but I can't. I haven't really practiced it a whole lot just because I'm practicing other things right now. But I will, before I die, I will learn how to at least play the notes of this solo. Maybe not up to speed, but I will play the notes. If you have not heard this, which I don't know where the heck you would be, if you're watching a hard rock, heavy metal guitar channel, I don't know where you would have been and that you haven't heard this. But if you haven't, I highly suggest checking this out, especially the Suicide Solution guitar solo. I used to have this shirt when I was in high school, and man, I wore this thing out. I used to wear this probably almost every day. Dirty, yep, but hey, I was a long hair teenager. I loved Randy Rhoads. I loved this album. It was, again, at the time, this was probably my favorite album that I just listened to over and over and over again, especially that part. But again, there's a lot of kick-ass songs on here. I mean, it's got all the classics. I Don't Know, Crazy Train, Mr. Crowley, Believer. It's got the one Black Sabbath song, Children of the Grave. It's got the other one, Paranoid. So you got to hear Randy do a little bit of Black Sabbath. I contemplated that, I'll get into this in the honorable mention, but D, really cool. So, and it's got this, cool little letter on here from Randy, a picture of there. So again, this was one of my holy grail records to find. Excuse me. I have the CD, I have the cassette, but it was hard for me to find this vinyl. I just happened to be walking around in like a vintage market or something, I want to say, 7-8 years ago or something, before records really were, coming back and really expensive. I think I picked this up for $20 because at the time it wasn't in high demand. So, but I absolutely, again, love this album. So that's my top 5. Now I will, my honorable mention that I was considering in place of the Scorpions. So if it wasn't going to be the Scorpions, it would have been my 5th top album would have been this, AC/DC Live at Donington. So this is my honorable mention. I had a tough time deciding which one I liked better, just simply because I love AC/DC. I mean, again, I have some videos of theirs on my channel. I love AC/DC, but this album does hold a little bit of a kind of a personal thing for me. When this came out, I believe in 91, 92. So when this came out in 1992, I was in high school, and my parents came out here where I live now for like a vacation. They were out here for I think 2 weeks, and I was at home because I had to like go to school. I think I forget what it was, but they left me at home. I wasn't, I was old enough to be by myself. Well, this had just come out. My parents were out of town. I walked down to the video store that we used to have where I grew up in Pennsylvania. I walked down the street. Philadelphia is where I grew up. So I walked down the street. I went to a place called West Coast Video, and they had this VHS tape, double VHS tape of this whole concert. And I rented it. And back then you rented movies for, I believe, 2 or 3 days. So I went home. I shut all the blinds, closed all the windows, all the curtains, made it super dark in the house. I put this on the VHS player. I cranked the AC down to like 60 because it was in the summertime, and I just got stoned out of my mind and just watched this over and over and over again. I would rewind it, watch it again, rewind it, watch it again, and then I would go back to the video store and re-rent it again. I mean, I kept it for the whole 2 weeks. I just kept going back down there and paying another $5 or whatever it was to keep renting it, because I just loved watching it. It was amazing. And I love Angus Young, but the reason, and again, it's a great album, but for me, the Scorpions, I liked them just a little bit better, even though this one holds more sentimental value to me just because of that summer. I love the Scorpions just a little bit better, and that's what kind of pushed it over the edge for me for the Scorpions, because I wanted to do it more musically for myself rather than sentimentally. But this would be number 6. And obviously a video like this, you could go top 10, top 20, top 50, 100, but those are just my top 5 albums, again with an honorable mention in number 6. I'd really like to hear your thoughts on my list, on what you liked, what you didn't like, or again, if there's any nuggets from any of these bands that I'm missing, please let me know. As always, I appreciate your support. I thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.